Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us, a guy I haven't been on, but he's been very kind to me in the past by posting my stuff early on when I first went on in 2009. I'm talking about Steve Quayle of SteveQuayle.com. Steve Quayle, thank you for joining us today on USA Watchdog.
Well, Greg, I'm excited to be with you because obviously I think that you've been at the top of the food chain when it comes to providing the most pertinent interviews with the most relevant information in real time. And I think people had better realize that the only honest press and the only investigative press are those who are doing it as you are doing it and others are doing it. We're on the Internet. We're telling people in real time what's going on. Unfortunately, we don't have to pass it through any of the lying media vultures that sit to pick the truth apart like a vulture would pick meat off the bones.
Well, let me continue. Of course, you had your popular website, been on since the 90s, SteveQuayle.com. You've written 8 books on everything from investment to survival to things in the Bible. And, you've been around, you're on the cutting edge, my friend. You're out there. But I wanted to get you on because, yes, you are on the cutting edge. You are out there a bit. But the news that I wanted you to comment on in the pre-interview was about Christine Lagarde. And if somebody would have come to me and said, hey, did you know that Christine Lagarde is forecasting 2014 with numerology? I'd say, oh, come on. Oh, stop. No. Well, lo and behold, somebody posted this on my site this week, and the reason why it's relevant is because the date that she was apparently, or it looked like she was talking about, is coming up this month in July. And Christine Lagarde was giving a speech in front of the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. This wasn't an accident. This is a planned presentation in front of journalists, the National Press Club. And this is January 15, 2014. And basically, she comes out and says, hey, I want to test your knowledge of numerology, and gives a forecast. And IMF, she's the head of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, gives a forecast based on numerology. I know this is also on your site, Christine Lagarde, and she talks about numerology and the magic power of sevens. And tell me about what is going on with this. She talked about every 7 years, and that the G20, G is the 7th letter of the alphabet, 20, July 20th, that 2014, sevens, 7 and 14, 2014 is this magic 7. We've had 7 years since the financial calamity. 2007 is when it really started, 7, 14, and that it appeared that she was giving some sort of a date in front of the National Press Club that, I don't know if it's between 7/7 or 7/14 or 7/20, 2014. Tell me what's going on. Clearly, anybody can go watch this on my site or your site. It says occult messages and speech by Christine Lagarde. Clearly, she was talking about numerology, which is the occult. Steve Quayle, what say you about her predictive, nature, using the numerology to predict what's going to happen in 2014 earlier this year?
Well, first of all, people have to understand that the Illuminati and the occult are one and the same with the standard hidden meanings to the general population, but announcements to the adepts or to the people that are on the inside. In this case, she's talking, as you know, to the press. And here's what I got out of it immediately. Number 7 is interesting because people have got to understand number 7 to realize why this is critical. It's the number of 287 times it's used in the Old and New Testament. And what's critical about this is that these people literally rule their lives by the stars and by numerology. Never in any reference that I know of, Greg, or anything that I've monitored over, 25 years being on talk radio and 30 years of an artist have I seen such a blatant presentation of the number 7. And again, this is fascinating to me because she's literally giving us the 7th month. By the way, Martin Armstrong and others are claiming we're in the war cycle. It starts this year and ends in 2020. But the point being is all of her veiled speech to the number 7, the 7th anniversary, when she says it's quite a number, yeah, it's God's number, but these people worship their God, and their God is Lucifer, and, it's fascinating because what does the IMF do? The IMF basically is the International Monetary Fund, and they're the people that dole out the money to their puppet governments. Now, when she's making the reference to 7 and 14, and she's talking about the financial market jitters, what I believe she's saying is that the end of the old financial system is past. A new one's coming on. New one, obviously, will be what the Bible talks about, the mark of the beast, the one world government. So the question is, does the 20th of July, and because the 20th of July seems to be 2014, you drop the 0, 14, 2 times 7, what she's telling everybody is that they're ready to make their move on the economy. And I believe that's simply going to be the global, how should you say, the end of the U.S. dollar in such a traumatic and dramatic fashion that people who aren't prepared for it are simply going to be wiped out, and they're going to be blown away. The occult, they have a maxim in their world. They must warn the people who they consider useless eaters and stupid people of what they're going to do. They derive some sort of sick pleasure out of that, and it's kind of like the ultimate mocking through numerology. And the point being is that when you count them, what she's made 10 different references in a 6-minute portion of her speech, you got to know that the message is being sent. And she starts out, as you know, right, she's following orders. She's being told what to say. She's being told what to speak, and she acknowledges that there are those who have control over her.
Well, and just so people understand this, she comes out in her speech and says, I want to test your knowledge of numerology. And she starts giving a primer on numerology. And she's doing this as a backdrop to forecast. This is in January 15th, 2014, beginning of the year, in front of the National Press Club in Washington. So this isn't some, audio. This is her on stage in video. There's no lip syncing. There's no, this. You can tell it's her talking. And that's what really, if you would have called me and said, hey, did you know earlier this year Christine Lagarde was forecasting 2014 by numerology? Not because we have a big pile of stinking derivatives, not because we've been printing money like crazy, not because, China's been buying a bunch of gold, what? You're going to talk about what's going to happen to 2014? And sure enough, she did. People should go to my site or your site. Under my site, it's under Hunter. It's under News from Around the Web, and it says occult message in speech by Christine Lagarde. She is clearly talking. She says the word numerology. She is explaining, like 2014, another 7, right? Which is a 2, 1, drop the 0 because it's no value. 2, 1, 3, 4, 7. 2 plus 1 plus 4 is 7. The 25th anniversary, 2 plus 5, 7, the aggregate number, the total number. You can reduce numbers down to one number. And this magic power of sevens. Do you think that she was forecasting a date, 7/20/2014, just in a few weeks away, less than 3 weeks away?
Well, I do, and I'll tell you why. V, the guerrilla economist, who's roguemoney.net, and you should have him on too. He basically made a statement almost 66 days ago that 33 days from the time that he was on the show, and that would have been prior to the $1.04 run-up in silver and the $45 plus run-up in gold, that it was going to happen according to his City of London sources. And then 33 days later, Greg, from that date would put us right in that middle of July, the 17th through the 20th. They said that's when the hell breaks loose and basically the markets begin to move. They were sending an Illuminati message to all of their adherents, followers, and the people who obviously are ruling the world behind the scenes that this is the date they've set. Now, they go by not only numerology, but they go by astrology. And so what you're seeing right now is almost, if you will, a mockery. We celebrate Independence Day, the United States, on the 4th, obviously July 4th. 1776, but the point being is they're taking that into a new realm. They're twisting the meaning. The prophet Jeremiah said, "Woe unto them who call evil good and good evil." So what these guys are doing, and these ladies, and let's just say these entities are basically telling everybody ahead of time that they plan to change everything. It's fascinating because the famous Rothschild statement that give me control of a nation's money and I care not who writes its laws, that's close. and then Jesus making the statement that the love of money is the root of all evil, and then I'm just taking one step further and saying the control of money is the control of all evil. These people are telegraphing to everyone that has the knowledge of the occult, which means hidden, the arcane, which means out of the normal realm of understanding, and they're speaking the message loud and clear. This month, something big starts to happen, and it changes the rest of the world for the next 7 years, which is interesting because then you talk about a 7-year tribulation in the Bible, and who can resist the fact that saying that everything's going on in the world, from what's gone on in the Middle East, the takedown of Middle Eastern nation, country after country after country, we're headed towards I would say, a Christ turning point of biblical proportion that's going to change everything literally in a matter of days, if not overnight.
Now, I know you're a gold, silver, platinum dealer. You've been that for decades. So I just want to disclose that. If people talk, I don't sell gold or silver, although I think people should have it based on, the math and not on the occult. And not on it,
right.
And I don't mean to, I'm going to make 10 times I mean, because you should have some capital left when I think things vaporize. A lot of people think that things will be hypothecated, rehypothecated. Your paper claim, just had Chris Martenson on. He says, this is what these paper is, the stocks or dollars or bonds are claims on real assets. You turn them in to buy real assets, and the claims, the paper has grown enormously, but the assets haven't. So there's going to be a lot of people not be able to make a claim on their assets. I thought that was brilliant by Chris Martenson. Do you think gold and silver? Do you think gold and silver are going to take off on the 20th or thereabouts?
Well, I think they've already started, okay, but I think that there are points to watch, and we need to look at this thing in perspective too. And one of the things that when you introduce a new author like I am, by the way, I've done 10 books. My newest book called Xenogenesis is out. So I've been at this a long time.
Oh,
but
sorry.
Years ago. Yeah, no. I'm just correcting it. When I started on talk radio 23 years ago, one of the first things I said, and you can imagine the ridicule and scorn that brought, is that the day would come when Russia and China would say enough to the U.S. dollar, and they would back their ruble or their yuan, and I called it the renminbi in those days, with gold, silver, and commodities. There would be a basket of commodities. I basically also stated in those days that we would come to the point in the United States, and when no one was talking the quadrillion-dollar number, and that's a lot of money, we still only deal with trillions, and Jim Sinclair was one of the first guys to come out and say, we're in a quadrillion-dollar, and that's 1,000 trillion.
That's in the derivative market.
In the derivative market.
1.2 quadrillion.
Yeah, and so the point is that I'm saying that, 15 years ago, and one nice thing about doing 9,000 hours of radio broadcasts, you can literally say, well, I said this on such and such a date, and there are archives to prove it. Unfortunately, when you try and put people in remembrance of past events, they have a hard time focusing. So bringing it forward now, I believe we're starting in the war cycle, and the war cycle is going to increase and increase and increase. And somebody said, well, we're spending money, we're printing money like there's no tomorrow. Well, in the IMF, in the world globalist viewpoint, there is an end to the old system, i.e. the old order, and bringing in the new. If every American understood that all their paper assets are basically pledged so many times over, we saw this in the housing mortgage market, trying to track down who owned whose mortgage, and if they understood how much a trillion is, let alone a quadrillion, the point being is all paper-denominated assets, there's no way to determine the total call on how many times those assets have been sold. It's just like the gold paper gold. We're seeing such a short squeeze getting ready to develop in the gold and silver market. Look, paper gold is not the same. Paper and the exchange-traded funds, I said when that came out, I said, you know what that is? The ETFs are fly paper for suckers, okay? And I still stand by that statement. If you can't hold it, you don't own it, Greg, and that's the thing that I'm trying to tell people. You have no control over that which you don't know. You can only have somewhat of control over that which you do know. In other words, you're holding stocks, you're holding bonds, you're holding IOU, our real estate investment trust. Let's look at all real estate-based investments in this country. Who's going to have the money to rent in a worst-case crisis. We're seeing the middle class wiped out, effectively wiped out. What happens when the consumers outstrip the producers? We're seeing drought. We're seeing famine. Can I be blunt? We're seeing the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and they're ready to go into their supercharged mode, and people are still trying to stay in a paradigm, a financial paradigm, that is absolutely as real a prison as any of the biggest prisons in the world. And until they break free of that, they're in trouble. Here's the simple thing. If you can control it, you can touch it, you own it. It's the old statement, possession is 9/10 of the law.
So a clear title house, a clear title farm, you have housing crashes in price. You can still live in it. A clear title of a piece of land or farm, something gold or silver or platinum in your hand. You're talking about, artwork. Even Jim Rickards, who included in his book The Death of Money, which I think is a brilliant guy. And there's a lot of math to back up what you're saying, Steve. And one of the things he said was you should have some cash, because it'll work really good for a short amount of time. That's what also Bob Moriarty on 321 Gold, I've been singing these guys' praises, because it's not the usual thing. Some, because it'll work good for a short amount of time. What say you about that?
Well, I quote James Wesley Rawls, who has the survivalblog.com. He said, cash will be king, then cash will be trash. Obviously, we're seeing the liquidity in the banking industry. We're hearing reports of people having to wait as long as a week for $3,000 to $4,000. The idea of changing over where the bank's reserves were lowered and lowered and lowered to where they used to have physical cash on hand. I'm talking currency now. Now everybody is subject to the Fed, and I think that people who don't have cash on hand, I always recommend to every one of my clients, Greg, over all these years, have at least 3 months worth of expenses to cover. I'm fascinated.
In cash.
Got it. In cash. I'm fascinated that people use debit cards and that they use credit cards to buy even cups of coffee. Just to let everyone know, whether it's an EMP attack or a cyber attack, we've been primed, we've been pumped, the mainstream press is talking about it. I believe a cyber attack will be at some point initiated, and that basically if all your eggs are in the basket subject to computer hacking and with all of the information, data, and gathering going on and everybody's access to everybody else's information, look, I believe that people are sitting ducks, especially those who do online banking. My best survival financial bit of advice today is if you do online banking, get out immediately. By immediately, I mean as the time that it takes you to take this advice and put it into action. Because can you imagine, Greg, we have a calamity, whatever it might be, and the entity comes on from the White House and says that, we've now got a national crisis, all banks will be closed until further notice. I mean, the control of controlling the money is what most people still lack. If their credit cards get turned down, or, for instance, Chase, Citibank, Bank of America on the websites that can look at the interruptions, I can't say that for the last 6 months the major banks of the world haven't been down more sometimes than they've been up as it applies to electronic banking.
Well, that's what happened in Cyprus. I mean, credit cards, poof. If you had euros, if you had gold, if you had silver, if you had a full tank of gas, if you had a lot of food, you did a lot better than the people who use a debit card. Because those people just had zero. I had somebody write me on my site. People write me globally, and I don't have any reason to distrust him. I'm from Cyprus, and what you're not seeing, life after Cyprus, people only keep enough money in the bank to pay their bills. It's turning into a cash society. There's all kinds of unemployment. People living in the street. It's absolutely horrible. I mean, Cyprus is the smallest EU member, and what a nice. Of course, the IMF was behind that. A lot of people call it a test. But let's go back to the date in Christine Lagarde. If it is 7/20, well, that's Sunday night. You think, well, the banks aren't open. Is that the time when possibly the president comes on, or the Treasury Secretary, probably the president, and he'll come on and say, hey, the banks aren't going to open tomorrow, but don't get alarmed. We just have a cyber attack, and I'm sorry, but we'll get everything all up, and everything will be okay. But everything won't be okay. Won't they change the currency at that point? Won't they change your money? Won't they lock it up? Won't they do that?
Yes, and according to all the sources, that I know and people that contact me, like they contact you from all over the world, they are talking about a 70% devaluation of the U.S. dollar.
A boom, right there, right then and there after the 20th.
Yes, sir.
And
they are saying that when the devaluation comes, they're not saying the devaluation happens on the 20th, but the European sources say that it is already agreed to, the feat is already accomplished, that there will be a 70% devaluation in the U.S. dollar.
Well,
now, see, that's just simply unfathomable to most people. It's just simply unfathomable. You know, Greg, years ago when I put up the Amero, I was one of the first guys that was hand-delivered the copies of the actual Amero. Then when I talked to different bankers, they said they've abandoned that. Now, Petraeus said we're no longer America. We're going to be the North American Union. That just simply means Mexico and Canada. And isn't that fascinating that as the borders become more porous to the south, the borders to the north and to Canada become more locked down? I don't think people know this, but basically there are reciprocal deals between the Canadian government and the U.S. government not to allow any form of people seeking asylum when this thing comes down. So, look, we're being pushed at from the south, and I simply don't think people understand the ramification of who is getting the electronic benefit transfer cards. When you're talking about what Lagarde is simply saying, let's just make it simple for everyone. She is giving 10 times the information of the date of the month. She's saying the month. And look what she's likening to World War
July
I.
is the seventh month of the year.
You got it. And she's likening it what is she talking about? She's talking about World War I. Isn't all she's also mentioning, by the way, she's mentioning the last financial calamity and almost saying, look, we lost our shirts that time, but we're not going to lose them this time. So I think, she's basically giving the control, and that's what you talk about. She is the control for the information on the financial markets. That speech was prepared for her in advance, and she's using multiple cases of numerology to announce that everything changes this month. And that syncs up with everything I know. It syncs up with everything B. the Guerrilla Economist knows. It syncs up with Jim Willey. It syncs up with everybody. And then you talk to his people day after day, hour after hour, Greg, and isn't the same statement being made? They don't know what's up, but they know something's coming. There's that general sense of knowing that things are going to change forever.
Well, the economy crashed in the first quarter. I mean, if you just look at the official numbers, and listen, all the government's numbers are phony, but, I mean, this is the best they could get it to look. They just revised the first quarter growth to negative 2.9%. And if you go back to the fourth quarter of 13, according to the official numbers, that's 2.6. Wow, positive 2.6 one quarter to negative 2.9 next quarter. That's a 5.5% cliff dive into a dry swimming pool. And they're talking about how we're going to see better days in the rest of the year and better. How? Based on what? I mean, clearly the trend is down. And I wanted to get into some other thing, too, and I wanted to get your take on this. A lot of people are already thinking, well, I should just load up on debt, and I'll pay back in these cheaper dollars. And my contention has been that, I wouldn't do that. And Jim Sinclair's has been this. They're going to revalue that debt. So whatever debt you take on, they're going to revalue it in whatever currency or whatever standard. Whatever it is, you're going to pay that debt back. What say you?
I'm with Jim Sinclair on that, and I'll tell you another thing. I believe you're going to see the move for student loans that are now $1 trillion problem. I'm going to basically say you'll see the day when national service will be required for some form of forgiveness or setting aside. But people how do you tell a graduate of a 4-year college that, with $80,000 in school debt that has to be paid back, that there are no jobs? Well, you've seen the statistics. What is it, 25 to 30% of kids under, 25, I think, or 30 are living at home now. And we're seeing the middle class wiped out. That's a critical thing. It's the middle class that built America, and every big business started small. But the point is that we are in this time period now where what Jim Sinclair is saying is absolutely true. For instance, here's the question I get asked all the time. I've got a $300,000 mortgage. What will that $300,000 mortgage turn out to be? Well, it will, if it's devalued by 70%, your money's also devalued, but the point being is that they can do anything they want. And I think that most people need to understand what they believe they have title to and access to in their home, even if it's paid off. They better make sure that they know the clear chain of title. They better make sure that they do. And even if they have a home free and clear, a farm or apartment, whatever it is, the point is they're subject to the tax authorities. And we all know this.
Property taxes, yes. You still got to pay taxes.
Yeah. You got to pay the taxes, and the tax collector shows up, whether it's the sheriff of Nottingham or you know, the whole fiasco with the Internal Revenue Service. Look at that. You've got absolute lying and absolute obstruction of justice.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the chances of, 7 hard drives all crashing after an investigation starts and all crashing at the same time, and the backup company was fired too. Come on. I mean, if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck, quack, it is a duck. It is destruction of evidence.
Absolutely. And that is basically a felony. So let me share this. In a kingdom of lies, telling the truth is always belittled. It's so devastating to me to see the foundational principles of the country. Look, there's no due process. National Defense Authorization 1867. We basically are seeing drones carrying armed drones being able to kill American citizens. We're seeing basically gun running done on a government level, and now we're seeing the enemies of the United States being basically armed to the T with man pads. And by the way, I may not have made it clear, but ISIS is showing Scuds now. I mean, you're talking about regional destabilization, and it's not lost on Israel that they're being surrounded, and it seems like on a time, you know, this is what people don't understand, a time when these people push the button, things happen. It isn't coincidence. It isn't chance. It isn't even the guy in Washington. It's the people behind him, because, listen, at best, they're all vassals working for the techno-lords that soon are to control the world. Now, what can people do? Number one, they've got to have food out of the system. Number two, they've got to have water. Number three, they've got to really ascertain, do they want to live in the middle of L.A. or Seattle or Brooklyn or wherever they're living, Boston? Do they want to live in Atlanta when all this stuff comes down? Because, again, the thing that we're seeing, Greg, and for the first time, I've never received an email like this, and on my alerts on stevequayle.com, the most important part of my website, because people send real time. In Florida, a Burger King shut down, claiming the trucks couldn't deliver their food to sell. So imagine the people that are used to eating in fast foods, and I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying this. Imagine people who are used to going grocery stores when the trucking strikes come, or the gas is $200 a barrel and translates out into $8 to $10 a gallon, whatever it does. People have lost track of what it takes to eat. We've taken so much for granted, and by the grace of God, we're going to have a wake-up call, and my goal, which in 23 years of talk radio, has been to tell people ahead of time, in some cases decades ahead of time, of what's coming down. The problem is when you tell people what they don't want to hear, the only way they can meet with truth is ridicule, scorn, and denial until it becomes real to them.
Well, I just want to back you up on your arming the Syrian rebels, Al-Qaeda. I've been talking about this for I don't know how long. I mean, John McCain goes over there, last year and gets his picture taken with top Al-Qaeda operatives. I mean, even Kerry says, well, about 1 in 4. Foreign press says half. And they want to come up just recently, last week, Obama wants $500 million to what? Arm the Syrian rebels. Now, you're going to, part of them are Al-Qaeda, clearly. And part of this armament went into the ISIS, and then part of the ISIS took over, military hardware left in Iraq for whatever reason, but they got it. They do have man pads, and we have armed. Clearly, we have in part armed this ISIS and Al Qaeda function, and they're saying we armed moderates. Well. You got a moderate guy and you got an Al Qaeda guy, and you're fighting side by side. And the moderate guy and the ISIS guy or the Al Qaeda guy looks at the moderate guy and says, "I'm out of ammunition. Give me a clip." What's he going to do? He's going to give him a clip. He's going to help him.
Yep.
They're fighting together. And so, anyway, I just wanted to back you up on that. But my final thing, which I want to catch, we're in the war cycle. And I have been saying, because people want to know when. And this is what I wanted to talk to you about, this Christine Lagarde speech at the beginning of the year, which is I'm surprised I didn't know about this earlier. Somebody posted it on my site, as I said earlier, but now we're looking like we have at least a beginning, starting gun date of 7/20. That's clearly what she was referring to. It looked like that's what she was referring to. But I have been telling people, here's what I say. And this isn't based on, I am Christian, but I'm not, this isn't based on a kind of a cult. I just say, hey, listen, I think 2014 will be 2007 on steroids. It'll be way worse. And 2015 will be a lights out of unbelievable, off the chart event compared to 2008. 2008 is going to look like a schoolyard prank. What say you about the next, 18 months?
Well, I'm so concerned that I guess I don't know how to sound the alarm any clearer. Obviously, the drought produces famine. Famine produces disease. One of the things that I've been sharing with people, Greg, is the fact that you're going to see the same thing that's happening to the vets, which I think is so horrific, is so egregious, is so devastatingly wicked, that you're going to see that on a national scale. And today I posted a story on my website about medicine, literally, whether it's anesthesia for surgery, whether it's painkillers. Everything seems to be disappearing, including saline. So the point, I hear from nurses, I hear from doctors, and it's almost like the medical profession can no longer even practice medicine. They're becoming, if you will, they're becoming just one more line of Stasi agents to give the Leviathan the appetite for more and more intelligence data. They're questioning people more about their private habits, their sexual habits, their finances, whether they own firearms or not. The problem is, see, this is what America missed its cue almost 10 years ago when FEMA brought in Marcus Wolf, the former head of the East German Stasi, the secret police, and Yevgeny Primakov, KGB, and they asked them to teach our government how to bring us under a surveillance society. When Snowden's revelations, if they're ever really revealed, I think it will be so drastic and dramatic that people will just be out of breath, okay? Now take that into the financial realm. The whole purpose of membership cards were to track every purchase. So if you buy at Costco or Walmart or Kmart or any of the marts or any, drug stores or wherever they have a membership card, everything you think, do, and say is going into that artificial intelligence program. And when I warned 10 years ago about what are called assassination algorithms. And then we come to find out that they denied them, and now they admit them. So the point being is that enemies of the state have increased, and everybody knows Weather Underground's leanings. And Bill Ayers talking about 33 million people would have to be murdered, and 66 million would, notice those numbers, 33 and 66, would have to go into re-education camps, and now with the explosion of the population, just look at it. We see FEMA camps. We see foreign troops in our country. I've been getting flack for that, even though I talked to multi-star generals, 4 stars, active duty, who told me 10 years ago there were 385,000 troops moved in the United States, and they were bivouacked in all the different bases that George Bush Sr. closed down. So if you talk about reality, it's conspiracy theory. And every time I hear the word conspiracy theory, I know this, that the neuro-linguistic programming protocol is in total effect, because you can watch the mainstream media. They will come up with a buzzword, and every one of the stations owned by the globalist trillionaires will say the same thing over and over and over, the buzzword. That's why you're seeing, and people said leading economic indicators. Well, John Williams has shown they're not leading economic indicators, they're lying economic indicators, I call that the devil's math, by the way. The point being is that their numbers don't add up. The country, you can't support, 49 million people on food stamps?
Yes.
100 million people? There's just no funding there. So imagine this, and this is the worst-case scenario. When the funding stops, whether it's a Social Security check that's deposited automatically into your account, look at what's happening to the U.S. military. Benefits being denied, even PX privileges revoked. Meanwhile, the foreign troops, you know what the average foreign troop in America makes under the table in U.S. greenbacks? $50,000. Some of them make $100,000. Now, if you put that into perspective, You're talking about senior level military money being given to the guys that basically have no allegiance to the United States, and the number one person in the sights of this, if you will, behemoth monster with a voracious appetite for freedom to take it away are the gun owners. And this fight for guns is a big deal because the United Nations vehicles seeing all through the country. Look, it doesn't matter if you've got 200 or 300 witnesses. People still want to think, well, we're talking, you got an email from somebody saying, well, it's just about too late for this country. Yeah, it is. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to tell everybody that Titanic, at least I am, that Titanic's going down. You cannot pay off the debt in the derivatives market without a total debt repudiation or a global reset. And years ago, this is another thing I said, you know what, you'll watch the globalists build up China so they can build up credit card usage, because what's better than, in those days, 30 to 50 million Americans with credit cards? How about 300 to 500 million? You can't let all that interest go to waste.
Steve Quayle, stevequayle.com. Thank you for coming on and explaining our main point, which is Christine Lagarde at the beginning of the year, which is the date is this month. Apparently she was talking about a date in July. She was strongly intimating some sort of a date in July. Steve Quayle, stevequayle.com. Thank you for joining us today on USA Watchdog.